If you clicked on this video, you probably are wondering how research papers have built-in story structures. You might already know about the standard structure of an original research manuscript, but you might not know how that standard structure maps onto a common story structure. Or you might think that science is not storytelling at all, and so you're curious about how story structures even relate to research manuscripts. So in this video, you'll learn what the standard structure of an original research manuscript is, how that standard structure maps onto a common story structure, and my handy framework that you can use to remember all the key elements of the story structure. And if we haven't met, hello, my name is Crystal. I'm a trained biomedical scientist turned clinical researcher and now scientific and medical editor. Since 2011, I've helped scientists, clinicians, and other professional writers to master the craft of writing so they can write with intention and maximize their impact in their field. So one thing I often hear from authors is that science isn't about storytelling, that it's about reporting data and informing readers, but not storytelling. But science is about storytelling. Storytelling is a powerful way to communicate information, and that's why scientific documents have built-in story structures. Now, when you think about the structure of original research manuscripts, you might think of the IMRaD structure. So original research manuscripts are widely known to follow this IMRaD structure, which stands for Introduction, Methods, Results, and Discussion. And this structure has an hourglass shape. So the introduction starts broad, then narrows down to the research question, and then the methods and results make up the middle of the hourglass, and then the discussion widens back out to the same broadness as the introduction. And this hourglass shape is a great representation of how to structure information in these sections. But it doesn't show you how these sections actually comprise a common story structure that helps you tell a story about research. So this common story structure is the 3-act structure. So in the 3-act structure, there are 3 acts separated by 2 plot points. Act 1 includes the setup. So in this act, the story starts with an exposition, which is where you learn about the setting and the main characters of the story. Then at the end of Act 1, you have plot point 1. So at this point, the story has an inciting incident or a moment of tension. And this tension engages readers so that they stick around for Act 2. So if you've watched a live play, this plot point moment of tension is one place where the play might pause for an intermission. Because the story piques your curiosity and excitement with the tension, you are more likely to stay after the intermission to continue watching the story. Or for those of you who watched or still watch standard or cable television, you might have noticed that TV shows were written to have a moment of tension before the commercial break so that you are enticed to keep watching after the commercials. Things are a little different now with streaming services, although with algorithm updates, we are starting to see more of this in streaming as well. So back to the 3-act structure. After the inciting incident or moment of tension, the story moves on to Act 2. So Act 2 is the confrontation stage, and this is where the action happens. So in this act, the story builds momentum, further engaging readers as the story approaches Act 3. Near the peak of the action, the story hits plot point 2. So at this point, readers reach a cliffhanger that heightens their emotions to entice them to keep reading the story and stick around for Act 3. So this point is another common time for an intermission or commercial break. Because you're left on a cliffhanger, you will likely stick around to see how the story ends. Then the story moves into Act 3. So at the beginning of Act 3 is the climax of the story. And this climax relieves the tension that's created with the inciting incident at the end of Act 1. Then the rest of Act 3 is the resolution, when the storyline ties everything together in the denouement. So here we see how the characters have changed as a result of what happened in the story. So this 3-act structure maps onto the IMRaD structure of research manuscripts. So in an original research manuscript, the setup is the introduction. Here you introduce the setting and main characters of the study. Then the tension at the end of Act 1 is the research question you set out to answer in the study. And this question sparks curiosity and excitement in readers, so they want to continue reading your paper to learn how you answered the study question. Then in Act 2, the action is the methods and results. These sections build momentum leading up to the end of Act 2. Then, at the end of the results, or Act 2, readers know the study findings, but they may not clearly understand whether the findings answer the study question. And this moment creates a cliffhanger that engages readers so they want to keep reading into Act 3. Then Act 3 starts with the climax, which is where you summarize your key findings and state how they answered the study question. This relieves the tension that is created at the end of Act 1. And then the resolution is the rest of the discussion section. And this section ties everything together in the story to show how the findings fit into the field and how the characters or the field have changed or advanced as a result of what happened in the story. So the IMRaD structure of research manuscripts maps onto the 3-act story structure. And I actually have a publication on this mapping. In case you're interested in reading it, I'll add a link to the description box. So the 3-act structure might seem a bit complex with acts and plot points and the details in each part of the structure. So to help you remember the parts of the structure, you can compress them into a simplified story arc with my handy framework to help you remember the key elements of the story. So this arc starts with the setup on one end and creates tension that leads to rising action at the top of the arc. Then the arc starts to curve down as you relieve the tension with the climax and then finish with the resolution at the other end of the arc. This simplified arc represents the 5 key elements of stories: setup, tension, action, climax, and resolution. And if we take the first letter of each of these terms, we get S for setup, T for tension, A for action, C for climax, and R for resolution. And these letters create the acronym STACKER. So as an easy way to remember the acronym, I like to think of it as stacking or building the story. So the STACKER structure maps onto the IMRaD structure of original research manuscripts. And this structure also maps onto the structure of a number of other technical papers, including brief reports and meta-analyses and systematic reviews and quality improvement manuscripts, protocol manuscripts, and even technical reports. It also maps onto the structure of many grant proposals, but not NIH proposals. NIH proposals and some other manuscript types use modified versions of the STACKER structure. I'll discuss these modified structures in other videos at some point, but if you can't wait, check out my Scientific Writing Simplified course, where I go into much more detail about story structures in scientific writing, from the overall structure all the way down to sentence structure. I'll add a link to the description box in case you'd like to check it out. And now that you know the built-in story structure of original research manuscripts, you might also like to know the best order to draft the sections of an original research manuscript. And you can learn all about my recommended process in this video right here. And if there's something else in particular that you'd like to learn more about, let me know in the comments. I create these videos for you, so I want to make sure that I'm creating something that you will find valuable. Thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely day, and I hope to see you in the next video.